In day one of our Flower Color Guide Summer Challenge, we are going to be painting from this book where we're doing the spray carnations. The idea behind this challenge was really for you to get to see how floral shapes can be painted, as well as how to break down your shapes based on your reference photo. I'm going to be taking you through how I plan, how I do each of these flowers. If you are new to my channel, hi, my name is Jillian. I'm a full-time watercolor artist. I quit my job as a psychologist so that I can share with you the mess and magic of watercolor. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to today's tutorial. I want us to build a composition of just red flowers that are just spread across this A4 100% cotton sheet. So on my desk, I've got my paints, my watercolor paints from Sennelier and a mix of other brands like Holbein, and I've also got some Mijello paints, 2 cups of water and an assortment of brushes that I'm going to be using. Now predominantly I love using the square and flat brush, but you can use any brush that you like. I would encourage you to get to know the brushes that you have and then go from there. So I have selected a couple of red color flowers that we'll be painting, and I thought that it would be so fun to capture a few red flowers. And I want to paint starting with this one, the spray carnation. The spray carnation is made up of these really cute 3-petal flowers, following which I'm going to do a French parrot tulip, and then I'm also going to have the Cosmo in this composition. So we're going to have 3 different flowers, and you're going to see how these flowers build on each other. Starting with the spray carnation, I'm going to be using my 1/2" flat brush, and it's going to be a red color. So I've got my palette here, I've sprayed it down, and what I'm taking here is a permanent rose and I'm mixing it with a little bit of Pyro Scarlet. Now I want it to have a slight orange tinge to it, so I'm adding in a little bit of orange so I get a little of a scarlet kind of color. So I'm starting off by building up my petals. And just so you know, I have not actually painted in a pretty long time. I took a break for a while because I was recuperating from recovering from sickness. So it's been a while since I last painted, and honestly, when I first got back to painting again, it did feel a little scary, almost like I wasn't sure if I could remember how I was gonna paint again. And I wonder if anyone else has these similar types of emotions. So right now, I'm just forming the petal shapes. Take your time to paint and slowly build up on your composition. I am lifting here. By lifting, get to reveal that front petal, so it creates this contrast between the front and the back petal. Now, one thing I noticed about the stamens for these flowers is that they are white, so I'm also attempting to lift this really tiny bit to kind of get a sense of that petal, and I noticed that it's quite hard to lift in some parts, so this is where I've got a wet brush instead, so I'm forcing some back runs to happen. Then I'm continuing to add more flowers to my painting. If you've not used the flat brush before to paint, I would highly encourage you to just try it out. And the flat brush has really surprised me, and it has also gotten me a lot more excited about painting. And one of the things why I feel so excited about using the flat brush is because I find it so fascinating that the shapes of the flat brush, which are typically used in landscapes, actually allows me to create all of these petals, and I think that my petals feel and look a lot more organic as compared to when I was using the round brush. That being said, I also know that everyone has got their own preferences when it comes to brushes, so I don't think there's really a right or wrong type of brush to use, but I do feel like when you explore and start to move past the norm a little, especially if you're just beginning with watercolor, it is so powerful when you realize that you can do a lot more. The possibilities are expanded for you. And I find that through my exploration of using various brushes, I definitely started to lean in on certain shapes, and I feel like this was also the start of me developing my own style. With my stems, I love to use a small round brush, and that's because it gives me more control. I would pick up less water and less pigment, and as a result, it also means that my lines are a lot more fine, and I think that's the outcome that we want when it comes to our stems. So even if your big round brush allows you to draw thin lines, I find that your big round brush would have a lot more capacity to hold water, so it also increases the chance of having your water flow out, and as a result you get blooms and backwash. So I think with that kind of consideration in mind, you definitely can lean in on having the option of using a smaller round brush. Now, when I am doing all of these fine lines and creating my greens, keep in mind that my blooms are fully dry, so this means that my green is not going to bleed and run into my flowers, because that's not the effect I want. But of course, with watercolor, there's so much possibility, and if you want your greens to bleed into your flowers, you're welcome to add it in while your flowers are still wet. Creating definition in your flowers means that you would add additional layers, and you can do that when your first layer is completely dry. So what I like to do is I'm basically using a darker red, and what I've done to create that darker red is basically use my scarlet red, and I have added in a tinge of mineral violet, and that actually darkens my red a little. And what I want to do is I'm trying to focus on creating my darker centers as well as the edges of the flowers, because I noticed that these are the spaces in which the as you're painting your shadows, one thing that you want to think about is take a look at your reference photo and squint to see where exactly your dark areas are, because this is then going to allow you to figure out where your shadows are. And I also want to caution you that you don't have to paint every single shadow in your painting. For me, when I started to do the details, what happened was that once my first flower got really detailed, I kind of have to do the same, if not similar to the rest, to create that consistency. Otherwise, it feels as though my painting is left incomplete. At the same time, I always have this dilemma of telling myself that as I'm painting loosely, I don't have to add details to every single flower, because it's good to have a focal point so you don't have too much of attention on every flower, such that visually when a viewer takes a look at your painting, they're not sure where exactly to focus. And if you take a look at my painting, you can see that the very first flower that I started detailing is most likely my star flower, and it's also the one with the most detail, and I'm leaving the rest to have just mainly separation of petals, which is what I did. Don't forget to hold your brush lightly. Also, remember to take a deep breath in and out as you are painting, because sometimes we get so caught up in the details, we start moving closer and closer to our paper and really get hunched over. And this is where I think we have to keep reminding ourselves that if you really want to paint loosely, you gotta keep breathing, and you also have to make sure that your posture is away from your paper so that you actually get a much wider perspective of your florals. Sometimes I stand to paint as well because I find that that really helps to give me a little bit more perspective. Now I'm pulling out a leaf just on the top just to kind of give the viewer a little bit of a pull towards the top so that it doesn't feel like everything is clustered at the bottom. Soon I'm calling brush down, and this is where I'm telling myself that I really have to stop painting, otherwise there's going to be way too much detail. Now the next time we're going to meet, we're going to be adding another type of flower to the painting, and as we meet, I can't wait for you to slowly grow your little painting. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been so fun to share with you my painting.